He's a native of Texas, Houston, but moved to the Shreveport area at the age of 2, and then came to New Orleans in 1984, and we couldn't get rid of him, so he just kind of stuck around. And he's worked in senior management for the Mercedes-Benz Superdome over the last couple of decades, currently serving as regional vice president of SMG, the management firm that runs the facility, and of course also runs Smoothie King Center. Of course, as you know, he's instrumental in the fast rebuilding of the Superdome following Hurricane Katrina, enabling the Saints to return to the city and spurring economic development. He recently received a Regional Legends for Charity Award from St. Jude Hospital at a function in New Orleans. Well deserved. Please give a warm Ready New Orleans Sports Foundation Quarterback Club welcome to Doug Thornton of SMG. Doug?
Thank you, Ken. As I sit up here, I'm always reminded about what a great football programs we have in the state. Tulane, LSU, all of our high school athletes. Nobody better than Woodlawn High School, that's right. Shreveport, many years ago. I'll be brief. I want to spend just a few minutes talking about the Superdome, some of the improvements that we're making. I know Dennis was here last week and he spoke about some of this. Talk about some of the upcoming bids that we have. And some of you may be wondering just how long will the Superdome be in existence. It's just celebrated its 40th anniversary, so we'll talk a little about that. Over the 40 years, the Superdome has just been magnificent for the city. And I see Bob Johnson sitting here. He was at the facility for so many years. He can attest to this. The Superdome is a bigger facility than the old domes that were torn down. You know, in the early 80s, you saw the dome in Minneapolis, the old dome that was in Indianapolis, the Seattle King Dome. All those facilities were about 1 million square feet. The Superdome is almost 2 million square feet, and that's what's enabled us to keep it modern. The envelope of the building is capable of allowing us to make renovations on the interior, which is exactly what we've done at a time when all these other stadiums are obsolete. And you might wonder, well, how can that be? Well, Dave Dixon and Arthur Davis and Buster Curtis, the original designers and creators of the Superdome, were visionaries. And I say that because at a time when they were constructing this building, the only prototype that you had was the Astrodome. And the Astrodome is now mothballed over in Houston, and the Superdome, of course, is still doing very well, enjoying a renaissance of sorts. But the Superdome was the first building to have luxury box suites at the mid-level. If you remember, the Astrodome had the old sky boxes. That's where the term came from. The Superdome was also the first building to have a video projection screen. Bob remembers the old gondola. It was an 8 sides video, projected video. Of course, now we have the modern HD, high-definition LED screens that are so prevalent in the stadiums, and we're going to have one of those next year. But those are the things that allowed the Superdome to be the prototype for other stadiums that were built in the early 80s, mid-80s. And what we were able to do after Katrina was come back and rethink what should go on the interior, what should be on the inside of this building to make it more modern and fresh. The club lounges, all upgraded, of course. We came back and reconfigured the geometry in the lower bowl because it was a building that was designed for baseball and conventions and that sort of thing. We added 3,400 lower bowl seats. We added 16 new suites in the area where the press box once was on the 300 level. Triple the size of the locker room. We're about to expand and do the same thing for the visiting team, visiting NFL locker room. So all of these things we were able to do it because of the size of the building. The building is approximately 2 million square feet. And if you were designing a brand new stadium today, like Minnesota or in Atlanta, those buildings are between 1.8 and 2.2 million square feet. So we have the square footage available to us to keep our building the way that it looks today. Over the last 10 years, we put about $350 million into the Superdome. And we're about to spend an additional $45 million here in the next 2 off seasons, starting with the construction of the HD video boards. And just by way of reference, I don't know if Dennis mentioned this last week, but the video boards will be about 5 times larger than the one that we have today on each end of the stadium. We actually looked at whether we should do a center hung board, much like Dallas has. We decided against that for a couple of reasons. One, the structural capacity of the building, all the beams that are in the ceiling, are limited. You know, we have, you can only put so much weight. I guess the bigger reason is we felt like we could get more bang for our buck. It was going to be more expensive to do the center hung board than do the wall mounted boards at each end, so we could actually stretch our dollars to have a larger HD format on each end of the stadium. And then finally, we didn't want to have to rig around the center hung board for major shows like Essence. We do a lot of different events in that building. Of course, Essence Music Festival has been there for 16 years now, 17 years I guess coming up. And we didn't want to have to rig around that board because it would be more expensive. So I think you'll be very pleased with what you see next year. We've upgraded the production room. Of course, if you're going to put an HD screen in, you've got to have HD cameras and HD production equipment. So we've got a whole new television studio that will drive those video boards. I want to touch quickly on the question of how long will the dome be viable. I get asked that all the time. I would answer it this way. We don't know the answer. I think the stadium, in terms of its physical capacity and the things that we have inside, make it in the top 10 of the NFL today. Certainly there are newer stadiums that are being built. Atlanta, you've got Levi's that opened 2 years ago out in San Francisco, where the Super Bowl will be played this year. Minnesota, which opens next year. I think there will be a point in time when we will know when the Superdome can no longer serve the needs of the community. That is not, it's not time to have that conversation today. Certainly 15 years from now, maybe, we'll be thinking about, you know, what to do in the future, but that building can serve this community as long as it's architecturally capable of doing so. And what I mean by that, there are a lot of facilities. We'll see the stadiums evolve. Bob's seen this over time. We've seen it happen in our business over time. In the early 80s, you had the evolution of the stadium, which was, again, the Superdome was the prototype. In the late 90s, the next generation of stadiums were built. Those would be Reliant Park. You know, some of the facilities that came along around that time, the building in Cleveland, M&T Bank in Baltimore. And now what you're seeing is the AT&Ts, the Atlanta Falcons are building a new stadium, and the Minnesota Vikings. Each time, there's a new evolution. And if you look at the Vikings stadium and you look at Atlanta's new stadium, what's different about it, architecturally, is they have the ability to generate more revenue for the team, meaning that they have very compartmentalized premium seating areas that are designed to maximize the revenues for the team. Eventually, stadium design will evolve to a point where the arrival experience of the fan will be different. Maybe you arrive by train and you go right into the stadium, just like they do at the Denver airport with the Westin Hotel, if you've been there. The way you circulate in the space might be different. The way that you interact with each other during the game might be different. Those are all things that people are studying now, but I don't think that we're going to see those significant changes for at least another 10 or 15 years, and the reason is many of the stadiums that were built in the 90s, Dave Dixon, many of the buildings that were constructed in the mid-90s will continue to be viable for another 20 or 30 years. And it won't be until those facilities and those communities decide they're going to build new stadiums, when they become architecturally obsolete, that we will get to a point where we see another change. So I think the Superdome is going to be very viable for a long period of time, and with the money we're putting into it, all of the back of house equipment and all of the front of house amenities that you see are going to be as modern as can be. A couple of words on the Super Bowl bid and the upcoming bids. We've got the college football playoffs that will be decided here pretty soon. We're in the hunt for that. We've got a bid in for Super Bowl for 2019 and 2020. Atlanta, Miami and Tampa would be our competition. Miami is embarking on a $300 million renovation. Many of the things that they're doing, we've already done with our stadium, and we're continuing to improve our stadium. So I like our chances in 2019 or 2020, even though the competition is very stiff with a new stadium coming in from Atlanta. But I think I was just close by saying the building has served this community very well for the last 40 years. There's been some significant moments in sports history there. You can go back and, Joe Montana's 5 touchdown passes against the Broncos, the Muhammad Ali Spinks fight, the Pope's visit. I mean, there's been a number of historical things that have taken place in that building, and we're looking forward to a lot more memories. So with that, I don't know if there are any questions. If not, I'll turn it back to Ken.
Over here. Hey Doug, you mentioned the heavyweight fights that were held in the Dome back in the day. So why is it not where you don't have any more heavyweight fights coming back to the Dome?
Well, it's a good question. Most of the fights today are bought by either HBO or Showtime, and they have to pay a huge fee, rights fee, and then of course there's a pay-per-view component to that. It's not like the old days where you could just buy a fight and put it in the gate. Receipts would pay the fighters. Now it's controlled by media, so they go where they can get the most return on their investment, and that would be in places like Las Vegas, where the casinos could sell tickets for $5,000 a piece because they can get the gaming clients in. So it's very hard for us to do that. Even though Harris is here, we have been involved with a couple of different fights over the years in the arena, but it's just not the same as being in Las Vegas, where the big gaming companies can bring their clients in.
Some of the other stadiums in the other NFL cities have wider concourses, and I noticed we have some choke points.
Good question.
Is anybody thinking out the box on how to improve the flow?
Well, if you go to Levi's out in California, they have an interesting design. The answer is yes. That is one thing that every stadium is looking at. Of course, every time you widen the concourse, you widen the envelope, which if it's an indoor stadium, that means you've got to heat and cool that space, so you've got a bigger volume, and operating costs go up. So they look at all of that. But if you go out to Levi's Stadium, you'll see that they have a concourse that actually runs where they've got the concessions in the middle. So you can almost take an express lane on the exterior portion of the concourse, as opposed to what we have and a lot of stadiums have, and that's sort of an inboard concourse that faces the field. They've got a concourse that faces the field, the concessions in the middle. You can access the concessions from both sides, and you've got this highway-like concourse on the outside of the stadium. It's an outdoor stadium, so you have a lot more room, but every facility is addressing that. We addressed it in our renovation in 2010. Our concourses were 18 feet wide. We expanded it to 60 at the 50-yard line. We can't expand it anymore in the end zones because of the constrictions of the envelope. We're looking at doing some improvements to the 500 level. If you know where I'm talking about in the end zones between the 4 and the 500 level, we call it the valleys. Right in the center of the end zone, it's a very narrow concourse. It gets very crowded in there with the portables that we have, concession portables. We're looking at putting an escalator in and a stair system. That will give us a lot more room, but that is an issue. And that's something that all the new stadiums try to address. The other thing is that you've noticed in a lot of stadium design today, they have these spectator platforms, these interactive decks. What we found is that, again, this is next generation stuff, that people, particularly the young people, will come to a game and want to congregate on those party decks, not ever sit in a seat, and most of them are on Facebook accounts and talking to one another, to their friends in other parts of the stadium, and they'll watch the game on the big screen. So the way fans consume the product today is different than it used to be. And pretty soon you're going to be, even this year, you're going to be able to see in the Superdome, you can download an app and get replays that would be different than what you would see on television. So eventually all of that's going to change as we go forward. Okay. Thank you guys.